Welcome in, everybody. This is week number 9, the final week of the regular season. And we're going to break down the Summit Athletic Conference and area schools. My name is Jeff Mahoney. And joining me, as always, is Northeast Indiana Game Nights, the sideline Swami, Casey O'Boyle. So, Casey, great regular season this year. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. And the first game I want to take a look at here is Concordia at Northside. So you had Deuce Taylor on the cover, and I think that that's a deserved honor for Deuce in his senior season over there at Northside.
Definitely. This is our last printed issue of Game Night, of course, the regular season finale. We was an homage, of course, to Deuce. He's had a fantastic season. Is he the player of the year? I'm not ready to say that yet because we put a lot of stock into postseason results, but he's going to be in the conversation, deservedly so. There's a good look at the cover right there. That was basically a shot where, I sent that picture. John Martin took a beautiful picture from week 2, Northside against Dwenger, and I sent it to my designer, Taylor Howenstein, who's a Northside grad, actually, but he's a fantastic graphic designer. And I said, Taylor, do what you want with this. Here's the headline, and do what you will. And he came up with that, pulled that picture apart beautifully. You got a lot of good action in there. And then, of course, the eyes on the prize, Deuce Taylor's eyes looking ahead for a possible trip to state, because I really do believe that sectional for 5A here locally is not automatically Dwingers. I think they're heavy favorites, but Northside could give them problems. And for that matter, so could Northrop.
Well, I'd have to agree with you. And I thought it was really, really interesting, though, last week. A big win for Northrop, 28-27 over these Legends. And what happened in that game, Casey? It was the first time all season long that Deuce did not throw for a touchdown. You see his stats here: 16 for 24, 160 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. What a game, though, by Hassan Lambert, 24 carries, 188 yards. He averaged 7.8 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. I just thought that was interesting. Northrop's kind of that smash mouth type of team, and they got under the skin of the Legends.
They played, or they got Northside to do what they wanted them to do. The Bruins coach John Zolnick, the defensive coordinator out in Northrop, I think he's a rising star in this conference, had a great game plan. They bottled up those receivers. They got a little pressure on Deuce Taylor. And as you said, no TD passes. If that wasn't his season low, I think it was his second lowest total for the year. And it definitely, proved that I think we're seeing it also with the Jeff Becker factor. Defenses are starting to figure out these offenses to a certain degree. And I think it echoes the point we've been talking about all year about how important it is to be balanced and to have a running game going into the postseason, because you don't know what the weather is going to be in the weeks ahead. It's going to be colder. We know that for sure. It's going to be colder tonight. There's always that chance of rain on a particular Friday night. You've got to be diverse, and you've got to be able to run the ball with some success. And so I give Northside a lot of credit for taking what Northrop gave them in terms of establishing Hassan Lambert on the ground, 188 yards, as you mentioned. It was a really nice performance for him. But kudos to the Bruins because they found a way to do it. It sure is going to be an interesting game tonight between Northside and Concordia, because these are two teams that I think have a ton of upside and both believe they can make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, for Hassan Lambert, there's 7.8 yards per carry. So on the season, he's averaging 7.5. It's actually, I believe, the best total among running backs with more than 52 attempts. Sean Collins has a little bit better, but he doesn't run the ball as many times as Lambert. You can see here 133 attempts on the season, so we'll pull that up in a little bit. But Concordia will be their opponent, and they're coming off a tough loss. They lost that game in the fourth quarter to the Carroll Chargers. Once again, 2 interceptions there for Brandon Davis. And Carroll, credit to their defense, they were able to hold Amir Drew to just 3 yards per carry. So if I remember correctly, that's his lowest output of the season as well. You can see the Saints at 3.1. Okay, Wayne last week at 1.6. So Concordia has actually kind of been going down a little bit towards the end of the season here.
But they played really well last week. That's the irony of the whole thing. The final score doesn't really show it, but Jeff, they outplayed Carroll. Really, I thought for 2.5, 3 quarters, it was 14-3 in the second quarter, and they were dominating this game. And Coach Manigault made a decision to go for a fourth down on his side of the 50. I think it was somewhere around the 40-yard line, and they didn't convert. And Carroll ended up getting a touchdown on that next possession to cut it to 14-9. They went for two unsuccessfully, but it was 14-9 then going into the second half and stayed that way until the fourth quarter. And then, Concordia just ran out of gas a little bit. But I'll be honest with you, they had a couple chances there in the third quarter. They had two pass plays into the end zone that could have resulted in touchdowns, and they were incomplete. They were right there with the Chargers. And this is a very dangerous team. And I know they're a little banged up. They're missing a few key guys tonight. Coach Manigault said they might be a little shorthanded against Northside, but this is a team in 3A. I'm sure they've already circled the Norwell Knights as a possible potential postseason foe. But I like this Concordia team. I like what they've done with Cam Johnson on the offensive side of the ball. His run last week for their first touchdown was remarkable. And we're getting to the point now where he has a highlight reel play, one or two, it seems like, every week. I mean, if this kid's not all conference, somebody's missing the boat. He's had a great season. And I certainly think as long as Amir Drew and Brandon Davis stay healthy and they can improve a little bit offensively, that defense is so good, as we know.
Yeah, Concordia did get the 27-16 win over Wayne. So even though Amir Drew had a hard time establishing the run there, they were able to pull off that victory, and that was that big game by Cam Johnson. So I'm loving this north side matchup right here. 3-5, 4-4. If we scroll all the way down to the Northeast Indiana game night, the Swami in this one has Northside by 4. So
I think
I love it, though. It's kind of strength against strength with that defense of backfield for Concordia against the offensive throwing game of Northside.
Yeah, and there's some new little subplots, right, that have been sprinkled in here in recent weeks. The advent of a Northside ground game, with Hassan Lambert taking on more of a focal point because people are really trying to take away the pass. And then on the other side, the Cam Johnson factor. I mean, at the beginning of the year, he wasn't even starting on offense, and now he's their best offensive player. So I think those are great storylines that really just a few short weeks ago, Jeff, would not have been part of this game if we were looking ahead to week 9. And both these teams, make no mistake, really want a win to close out the regular season to see that they can't get that mojo going for the postseason.
Yeah, and I'd love to bring up these rushing leaders here. But yeah, Hassan Lambert, I think you're looking at an all-SAC performer this year for him.
We've got him right now, Jeff, in game night for all 35 schools that we cover. We've got him number 3 behind Demarius Cowan, who's got 1,368 yards. Chris Thomas, just over 1,000. Hassan Lambert, we have number 3 in the area with 993 yards. So just 7 yards shy from breaking that 1,000-yard plateau, which is pretty impressive for a kid who, A, plays alongside Deuce Taylor, where they throw it around a lot, right? And then played a lot of defense too. So to your point, averaging 7.5 yards a carry, he's had a fantastic season. And of all these great backs in our area, the seniors, that's the one that if I was a college recruiter, I think I would have my eyeballs on the most. I think he's got a ton of upside.
Well, and he's played both sides of the ball as well. So now really just focusing on the offensive side. So the next game we want to look at is Northrop at Dwenger. Talk about strength against strength. This Northrop team, they certainly can run it. We've seen it with Demarius Cowan week in and week out. And the Dwenger defense can certainly shut you down. We've seen that as well.
Yeah, this is, again, can Northrop pass with some success tonight? That's a big question mark. Will Dwenger have Devin Tittman? He was dinged up a little bit. There's, I think, a decent chance the Saints may rest him. I tried to press Coach Garrett a little bit to find out. Coaches are always a little cryptic in when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think it might be a game time decision. My hunch is he won't play, that they'll save him for the postseason. You've got a bye next week. You've got Anderson, in the opener for the Saints, which is kind of like a double bye. No offense to Anderson. And then a likely rematch against either Northrop or Northside in the sectional championship. So I think the Saints, make no mistake, they want to win this game. They want to go out on a winning note, keep their momentum going that they've established here in recent weeks. And then Northrop, my goodness, we already talked about 28-27 last week over Northside. I already mentioned John Zolnick, the defensive coordinator. I think he is an up-and-comer to keep an eye on, doing a really good job over there. And, Demarius Cowan, 257 yards rushing last week against Northside. I don't think he's getting those numbers against the Saints tonight, but without Devin Tittman, who knows? I mean, we saw what Homestead did when Devin went out in week 4. It was a difference maker for that defense. You'd like to think that the Saints shored some things up, and they're going to find a way to fill somebody in his absence. But there's a good look at the Snyder stats from last week. That game, that surprised me a little bit. I mean, let's face it, Snyder was winning 7-3 in the fourth quarter, and if it wasn't for that fumble, midway through the quarter that Ashton Scary jumped on for the Saints, Snyder probably wins that game.
It was a big game for the Bishop Dwenger DBs. Adam Lee and Colin Stauffer were fantastic. They each had an interception. They totaled 14 tackles, each with 7 tackles apiece. And I don't think enough can be said for Gavin Groves, the safety for the Saints. He had an outstanding game as well, led the team in tackles. But to note here, Tyrese Brown, the fantastic runner for Snyder, he has really been picking it up as of late. They wanted to establish him, and the Dwenger D was able to contain him, even though he had the Panthers' only touchdown.
Yeah, that was after that long pass to Darren Swanson early in the game. He had just a short, 1-yard run or whatever for the score. But yeah, he was bottled up. The Snyder game plan was really good. They had the right approach. They had Luke Hopper, the sophomore quarterback, doing things that were within his comfort zone, I think, early on. And then things just kind of fell apart for the Panthers there at the end. They ended up with 4 turnovers. That was the difference in the game. Conversely, the Saints had 2 uncharacteristic interceptions for Brendan Lytle. He still ended up 11 for 15 and was running for his life. I thought Snyder's defensive line ate Dwenger's offensive line up. I mean, Ison Robinson was a man. And if it wasn't for Brendan Lytle's elusiveness and his savviness, I don't think the Saints win that game. The turnovers certainly helped Dwenger. And congratulations to Brendan Lytle, the all-time leading passer now in Bishop Dwenger history, passing Kevin Mers, which I think that record stood for 14 or 15 years. So that's a pretty neat honor for a kid that's won a lot of football games over at Dwenger.
The Swami says 22 for Bishop Dwenger. They'll win it by 22 points here. How many yards would you have Demarius Cowan going in this game?
I think it's a huge caveat if Devin Tittman's playing. If Devin Tittman's playing, I'd say under 75. Without him, it's a totally different situation. I don't think he gets more than 150, though, even without Devin. If he does, then they're going to be in a position to pull off an upset, make no mistake. But I think Dwenger's defense is so good. This would be a good opportunity if Devin Tittman does not play for a couple of these other guys to step in and perform at a high level. And they'll have to, because Demarius Cowan has proven week in and week out he's one of the best backs in the area. And again, leads the area with 1,368 yards. So this is a tall task for the Saints, especially if they're missing their leading tackler.
Well, this is pretty fun here. When you pull up all states and then you look for Mr. Cowan, he ranks number 19 here in the country on max preps and rushing. So not bad there for the senior tailback from Northrop.
Not too shabby. Again, a kid, he just picked up an offer, I believe, this week from Trine. Really a great young man. We've got so many good quality young people playing football for us here in Northeast Indiana. And a lot of these guys, Jeff, that are seniors that don't have their scholarships sewn up yet. I mean, a lot of kids that have been under the radar to this point that are kind of, I don't know, proving themselves, making names for themselves as seniors and getting some opportunities. It's great to see. That's a young man I want to see play at the next level, and I think he will.
Well, the next game we're going to look at Bishop Lures at Snyder. This is a fun game right here. And by no means can you count Bishop Lures out. What they did last week with their running back, Sir Hale, against Southside. I mean, Sir Hale can absolutely do everything for this team. He had 28 carries for 187 yards, averaging 6.7 with 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 63 yards for 3 touchdowns. Oh, and by the way, on defense, Sir Hale was 6 tackles. So he's an impressive player, and he's only a junior.
Not a bad stat line for Sir Hale. Again, if he wasn't knighted with that name, he should have been after last week. Now 5 touchdowns in one game, the second most, tied for second most in Lures history. Speaking of history, Lures history, I dug up this. I got to show you this. This will take you back, Jeff, from 2000. This was 20 years ago, week 7 actually, so a couple of weeks removed. Bishop Lures going into the 2000 Snyder game was 0-14 against the Panthers. I remember at the time, as we were putting some of this stuff together, kind of being shocked. I mean, this was towards the beginning. This was technically year 3 of Game Night, because the first year we called it SAC Football Weekly. So our third year, Matt Bear and I putting out the product. And I remember just being stunned, thinking Bishop Lures, they've been playing for about 40 years or so. They've never beaten Snyder. They were 0-14 going into that game. And I got to point this out just because the Swami would want me to. I just want to point out right here. There it is. Bishop Lures versus Snyder. Swami said Bishop Lures. I don't know how he did it, looking back 20 years. And they were victorious. Were the Knights 14-0 on Tailgate Talk, tonight's show. We had a 2-way offensive lineman, defensive lineman, Pat Burkhardt, a captain, as our time machine guest, and he had great memories from that game, from that night. And I think those kids had a ton of pressure because they were talented. Anthony Spencer and a lot of really good football players in that era. But they felt like the weight of the world was on their back because they'd never beaten Snyder. They did it that year. They came back the next year. Here's another one, Jeff, if you can pan back to me. This is the next year. They switched to week 1. This was our cover in week 1. And this was a great game. 27-26, Lures won. And the Swami also picked Lures that week, for the record. But what they turned things around. I think they got 2 wins then during the Jalen Smith era, I believe, his sophomore and junior year. So I think they've maybe won 4 times. I could be wrong about that. But either way, getting that monkey off their back, a storied program, finding a way to beat Snyder for the first time 20 years later, a lot of history there. Do I think Lures is going to win this game tonight, Jeff? No, I don't. But I like what they've done the last couple of weeks. They've shown a lot of grittiness, and they are, for the first time, really, really healthy. They got a lot of their guys back. Isaiah Simmons is back. Krayshawn Menson's back. Brody Glenn's back. They're still missing Foster Johnson, offensive tackle. But this team's coming around. Yeah, they're showing some of those scores, some of those great teams.
34-13, Casey.
Yeah, now that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. There was that stretch there where Lures was winning state championships the way I eat potato chips. And then, of course,
Kenny Mullins was the cornerback on this team with Jalen Smith.
Yep. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Those are some great teams. And then you see a lot of modern day there at the end. That was the thing about this team that beat Snyder the first time. They then went down to state finals. They were 14-0, and they got smoked by Evansville Modern Day. And Coach Mike X, God rest his soul, he made the joke at the time. All right, I got to do my Mike X voice. Casey, we couldn't beat. We're just a lowly bishop. We can't beat the mother of God. That was Mike X putting a spin on it. And then, of course, Lures in 2001 came back a year later and returned the favor and smoked Evansville Modern Day. I was at both those games, and a ton of great history there in terms of Bishop Lures.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the score, 2000. Look at that.
And then like you said, the 57-29 victory a year later. It was pretty crazy what Matt Lindsay was able to do on a statewide stage during his tenure there with Bishop Lures. So you're right, it is a fun rivalry. And obviously with Snyder, Tyrese Brown, Luke Hoppert seems to be getting his feet underneath him. Not an easy thing to do, come in I don't want to say midway through the season, but to come in and become the starter of the team last week, like we said, 11 of 21 for 105, had the 2 interceptions, but he can do it both ways. And I think he's got a really bright future the next 2 years with the Panthers.
Yeah, Luke's going to be a great player, just like his big brother. And you know, in a way, he didn't have a ton of pressure on him. And I think a lot of people were calling for a change to be made. I think I even said earlier in the year, I didn't feel like any of the fault of Snyder's slow start really belonged at the feet of Darren Swanson. I just think they had more things to worry about than just the quarterback position. And so in some strange way, as a sophomore, I feel like they were able to kind of coax him into it, that there wasn't as much maybe pressure on him had they started him out in week 1, and he's starting to come into his own. I'd like to see them develop some more receivers, for sure. They don't seem to have that big play threat in their aerial game. That will certainly help if they find somebody maybe in some of these younger classes, but their defense is awesome. And I think we thought they would be as the year went on. They're getting better. They're much better against the pass than they were earlier this year. And, that Homestead rematch in a couple of weeks is going to be really, really intriguing, because I feel like Snyder believes they are a completely different team, and I'm looking forward to that one.
You can run the ball. You can keep the ball away from the opposing offense, and this number says it all right here: 44-0 against Northrop. So when you got Dominic Moon right here as the all game night watch list, Ison Robinson, like you said, has been worth the price of admission. Some of the sacks and the plays. You see the fake punt last week?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. They're using him in different ways. And what about his play where the throwback screen to Vinny Feecable that he snuffed out? I thought that was he's been really good, and he's gotten better as the year went on, Jeff, I think. But I think that game against who I believe is the best lineman in the area, Vinny Feecable, the Indiana University recruit, I thought Ison Robinson more than held his own. I thought he proved to me that he's a big-time recruit. I would not be shocked at all if that's the film that I'm sending out and see his recruiting stock rise dramatically in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And plus, he really didn't even know that he was going to be a part of the Panthers until August. So give yourself a couple of weeks, a couple of games to get acclimated with the rest of your players. Remember, they did lose the first 2 games of the year, but since then they have won 4 of 6. That tough loss against Dwenger. But I agree with you. This October 30th matchup with Homestead, even though Homestead will probably be a heavy favorite, probably, what would you say, 2 touchdowns?
I would say at least 2 scores right now, but it'll depend on personnel, Jeff. But I totally agree. I don't think it's a 30-point game. I think Snyder's defense is dramatically better. They're playing with a ton of confidence right now. And then we talk about that young quarterback, Luke Hopper. He's got a lot of reps now under his belt, so he's going to be more comfortable in what they want to do. That coaching staff will have a few tricks up their sleeve for that game for the Spartans. And you always wonder if the Spartans, these are 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, that look ahead thing or that look past thing. We already beat this team by 30 points, right? We got Carroll maybe in the second round. That's our rival, not Snyder. You beat him by 30. You warn against that as a coaching staff, but they're kids, and you just never know. That's a very compelling matchup right out of the chute for Class 6A.
So Luke Hopper, 583 yards, completing over 50% of his passes. So that 583, if you look here in the SAC, would have him right below Aiden Meek from Wayne, who got the start right from the jump. So good matchup over there at Spooler Stadium. Always a fun place to watch a game, and that one should be good.
No doubt.
Carroll is traveling to Wayne, and this is a really intriguing matchup because Wayne is going to ground and pound you. They're probably going to win the time of possession in this game, and Carroll's going to have to take advantage of every offensive opportunity they have. I'm sure you got them as the favorites, but I like this game.
I do too. And, I have a Friday morning breakfast group of old guys that they're all washed up, but still love their high school football. And we have a very cordial gambling ring, if you will, but there's no money exchange. It's only for food, only for breakfast, because we like to eat our breakfast. And I think everybody but one guy took Carroll to cover. Swami has Carroll by 22. And after we went to press a couple nights ago, I tell you what, Jeff, the more I thought that might even be too high. Let's not forget 2 weeks ago, Wayne really outplayed Concordia. I mean, they lost on the scoreboard, I believe, by 11 points, but they outplayed the Cadets, did the Wayne Generals. Last week, I thought Concordia outplayed Carroll. And so this is a team, I think, that, like you said, wants to run the ball. They can play keep away. Defenses have kind of figured out what Carroll wants to do offensively to a certain degree. Now, granted, the good defenses, right? Dwenger, Homestead, Concordia. Is Wayne in that category? No, that would be unfair to say that they're in that category. But I do think they've got some playmakers. I think they've got some athletes. I worry about their back end in a game like this. But Coach Haydock's a great coach. He was ejected from last week's game. I've got it under pretty reliable source that I think he's going to play or coach this week. That's my understanding. I don't know that for certain, but that's my understanding. So that tells me that they got with the IHSAA or the officials and worked something out to suggest that maybe his ejection was not warranted. Again, I don't know all the details on that, but my understanding, he will coach in this contest. And that's a big deal, I think, for Wayne. This is a team, I think, that can make some noise in Class 4A. Their sectional, to me, is wide open, even though they only have one win. They've got athletes. They're built for November, right? Because they want to run the ball. I like this team. Even though they've got one win, it would not shock me at all if Wayne hung around tonight and made this a contest against Carroll.
So you see Huntington North is their first round opponent. They're 3-5. They don't play near the competition that Wayne does week in, week out. I really like what I saw here with the stat line of Mr. Christian Trimble, the sophomore QB. So we'll pull it up here. 6 of 10, 58 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's a good-looking QB rating, completing 60% of his passes. Trimble ran 2 times for 6 yards. So they got a QB change over there at Wayne.
Well, I think Aiden Meek might be dealing with an injury, is my understanding, and may not play again in this game. But again, this isn't a pass-happy offense. Make no mistake. I mean, they kind of throw everybody in the box and try to run it down your throat, play keep away, use the play clock till its very end. I expect a heavy dose of Chris Thomas, Lamar and Nelson, and Sean Collins for sure. Again, Carroll's defense, if they cannot stop Wayne consistently and get them into passing downs, and you know darn well Sherwood Haydock's going to go for it on his own 30-yard line almost every time, unless it's 4th and forever. So you've got to find a way to get the ball out of their hands and get it back to Jeff Becker. And who knows, maybe I'm misreading this. Maybe the Chargers blow their doors off of them. It's very, very possible with that prolific offense. Mason Englert's had a fantastic season, but he's been kind of quiet these last couple of weeks. And the Chargers offense has been kind of quiet these last few weeks. So it's an intriguing matchup. Who's got more to gain? Just are they resting people for the playoffs? All those questions you have to ask yourself. But I get the feeling Wayne wants to earn a little respect and maybe a little confidence too, going into the postseason. Like, hey, if we can play with a 6A power like Carroll, or maybe even beat them, man, we can go a long way with this 1-7 record all the way through the state playoffs. And so I would not discount what Coach Sherwood Haydock and the Generals could accomplish here in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely have to give the edge to Carroll. I mean, Jeffrey Becker's just going to find a way to get those wins like we saw last week. Hunter Mertz, the first player in the conference to 20 tackles in one game, 2 tackles for a loss. He's basically their goal line running back and pretty much their go-to guy when they need a running back outside of Jeff Becker.
Yeah, Hunter's a unique player. He does a little bit of everything for them. And again, he is kind of their goal line guy. He was last year too. He didn't have great stats necessarily, but he had a ton of touchdowns, and he's just a hard-nosed kid that makes plays on both sides of the ball. He'll be tough to replace next year because he's one of those guys that's not going to go wow you or go play Division I football somewhere, but he is a heck of a high school football player. And at a school like Carroll, where they don't play many guys both ways, they've got two of them. Reed Muncie in the trenches is another one that comes to mind. They're going to have a hard time replacing both those guys next year.
But one thing's for sure, and it's established, there's no real go-to running back over at Carroll. Jeffrey Becker can definitely get it done, and we'll hope that it's enough, I guess, going through the rest of the season. Now, they're going to travel to Warsaw for their first game, not next week, but the following week, as 6A and 5A will have a bye. I like them to beat Warsaw, especially with Jeff Becker, and we might have another sectional championship rematch if Homestead can get past Snyder.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. This is kind of a favorable matchup this week, Jeff, for Carroll, because they're going to see a similar type offense, certainly a similar approach with what Wayne wants to do compared to Warsaw in a couple weeks. So good preparation for this defense, good preparation for the offense. You know they're going to go no huddle, and they're going to try to maximize every snap offensively. So this is lining up nicely, I think, for Carroll in preparation for their Class 6A Sectional 3 opener against Warsaw. And then again, don't look too far ahead, of course, if you're a Carroll Charger or any of these teams, because Homestead appears to be looming there in the sectional championship game.
Casey, if we have 4 All-SAC linebackers, who do you choose? Is Hunter Mertz on there? Is Luke Palmer, Devin Tittman, Dominic Moon?
I think right now, Jeff, if you had to press me and I could only take, I would start with 2 that I think are automatic. I would take, and now that John Michael Fabini, 10.5 sacks, has had a fantastic season. I don't know how you leave him off. I don't know how you leave off Devin Tittman either.
Can you almost call John Michael Fabini a defensive end?
No, I think no. They basically have 3 down linemen. He's an outside linebacker. I suppose at the All SAC voting, they do change things up, and they have at-large decisions, and they move things around. To me, he's a linebacker. He's coming hard off the edge, and he's got all those sacks. But if you're talking middle linebackers, I'd say Devin Tittman for sure. I like LaShawn Miller out at Northside. I think he's had a fantastic season. Hunter Mertz, it'd be hard to leave him off. Dom Moon, again, for a team that's been kind of quiet in terms of their slow start, has had a fantastic season. He's leading the Panthers in tackles. Those are all good. Who am I forgetting? There was somebody else you mentioned early on.
Well, Luke Palmer.
Luke Palmer. That's the other one that's automatic. Luke is automatic. If you're talking middle linebackers, Luke, and I'd say Devin Tittman for sure. Those are my top 2 guys. And how do you forget all the guys over at Concordia? I mean, Sam Hudson, Gagline, Cooper Harris. I mean, those are some pretty good linebackers over there too. Listen, coaches are going to have a hard time this year. But think about our quarterbacks. I'll flip it on you, Jeff. Who's the quarterback that gets left off All City? I mean, you got Deuce Taylor, Jeff Becker, Brendan Lytle. I mean, who do you leave off?
I mean, to be honest with you, I think the player of the year is Mr. Evan Ormsby over there at Homestead.
That's just it.
I mean, look, he's already tied Jeff Becker for number 2 with touchdowns. Yeah. So I would go with Ormsby as a All-SAC quarterback along with Deuce Taylor if you're going to have 2 first-teamers.
Well, I made my point for myself forgetting Evan Ormsby. Shame on me. I mean, think of that. I mean, we are so stacked with talent at a lot of position groups, but especially at the quarterback. When we've talked about it outside the area, we've got great quarterbacks as well. GameNight's going to have a hard time keeping a couple of these guys off our postseason team. I don't need 6 or 7 quarterbacks, I mean, unless the kid can punt 40 yards, he may not make it, because you got to make some tough decisions. But it's unbelievable. And again, Evan Ormsby is the X factor for sure. Conference champion. My goodness, where he came from after 2 weeks of action is remarkable. How do you leave him off first team? How do you leave Deuce Taylor off first team? Jeff Becker, you could always say, he's a junior. His time will come. And then Brendan Lytle. I mean, he's the only one of the bunch that's won a state championship, for crying out loud. He's Bishop Dwinger's all-time leading passer. Tough decisions. I'm glad I'm not making those decisions for all conference.
Homestead is traveling.
But thanks for putting me on the spot, Jeff. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I appreciate that.
It's a fun conversation.
It is.
Homestead is traveling to Southside, and looks like Homestead's going to wrap up their second SAC victory bell. Congratulations to the Spartans. They were 0-1 to start the season, and what they've done since then is short of magical.
It's remarkable. And think about not only they 0-1 with the kids that were quarantined, they lose 25-21 to Northrop. I think a lot of people, and myself included, at that point thought, okay, they're not repeating, especially with that loss, because at that time it felt like a bad loss. And then the week later, they barely beat Concordia 7-0. And I firmly believe if Brandon Davis plays in that game for Concordia, that the Cadets win. And we're not even talking about the Spartans, because they've got 2 losses out of the chute. And then, of course, Coach Zolman can't coach, right, against Bishop Dwinger, and they win in triple overtime, 35-34 against the Saints. All these things that had to line up just right. It's been a weird year for everybody personally, but the football season has kind of mirrored that. But at the end of the day, you've got to tip your cap to the Homestead Spartans, those coaches. I've said it all along. I think Bill Skelton is a fantastic offensive coordinator. How he's helped Evan Ormsby develop this year, and that we knew they had great receivers. They finally found ways to get the ball to them in a confident way for Ormsby. The offensive line has been healthy and consistent all year long. Can't say that about every other program in the area. And the defense carried them early on until that offense got going. Special teams are always good too, of course, at Homestead. So great job by the Spartans. There's nothing more to be said other than congratulations. You earned it. Ring that bell loud and proud tonight, because they are going to beat the Southside Archers. Make no mistake.
Well, and it's like you said, special teams are great too. Remember, in that win against Bishop Dwenger, our player of the game for Homestead was Carter Dixon, the punter.
Mm-hmm.
Angling those punts to the sideline. I think he had 2 or 3 that were inside his 10-yard line that weren't returned and were on the other side of the 50. That's an outstanding job by our punter.
He's done a great job. Again, we've had great kickers and punters too. I mean, it's just been a year chock full of talented football players in Northeast Indiana, especially here in the county. And Carter Dixon's done a fantastic job. Homestead, and again, looking at, if we're going to forecast down the road, they've got a decent chance. There's no Carmel this year in the top half of the bracket. They're in the southern half, and that's always seems to be for our bigger schools here in Northeast Indiana, the bugaboo. You think about the great Tranquil teams, right? They couldn't get by Carmel. You think about some of the great Snyder teams. Many times it was often in Carmel, either in the regional or semi-state, that would kind of be in the way. I think Westfield is that team this year. I believe I believe they'd be in the regional. I'd have to look that up. They're ranked number 2 right now in Class 6A in both polls. So they're very good, but they don't play the big boys. The Shamrocks don't play Center Grove. They don't play Ben Davis and Warren Central and all those schools. So I think their 7-1 record maybe is a little misleading, Jeff. This could be the year. Everybody thought last year was the year, right? Because of Camden Rogers and Jake Archbold and Luke Goody and Griffin Little, all those kids and then the great supporting cast underneath them. Well, this team, why not this year? Maybe this is the year they break through and get all the way down to state. You just never know, because I tell you what, I think you look at a lot of those teams. Elkhart is very good. They'd have to beat them. Lafayette Jeff, certainly. But why not them? A lot of those other schools that are on that top 10 there are southern half schools. They're going to have to beat up on each other. So you got to take care of business first, beat Snyder, beat either Carroll or Warsaw, and then see where it goes. But if they're healthy, I like their chances.
Yeah, and if you look at the state leaders, Lafayette Jeff has a good-looking, I guess that's Lafayette Harrison. Thought it was Lafayette Jeff. But going back to the Southside game, with the Archers, hats off to what they're doing. They're getting better. They'll host New Haven next week. Are they better enough to beat Homestead? I don't think so, Casey. But Quincy English had a nice game with 220 yards, 222 yards passing, and 3 touchdowns last week against Bishop Lures. The week before against Northside, he was making good, quick decisions. And Javonte Malone, I think he can play on any team in the SAC. I think he's a starter on any team in the SAC, really, at cornerback. And what I'm seeing from him as a receiver, I believe is a receiver too.
Yeah, or maybe even a slot guy. I like his versatility. I agree with you. He's a very talented athlete. They've got some players. They really, really struggle in the trenches, I think, right now.
Yeah.
They're depleted there, and that's where they kind of get exposed, I think, against the better teams in the conference. They got their one win, though, right? They beat Wayne 29-28 a few weeks back, and they'll be a dangerous team in the postseason because they do have some playmakers. Roosevelt Norfleet, the head coach, told me that Quincy and Roosevelt Norfleet Jr. were going to kind of share reps tonight. So we'll see if that bears out.
Okay, yeah, Southside, the 29-28 victory against Wayne, and they'll open up against New Haven. And I think this is a game where Homestead, just like last week, they'll knock off the rust a little bit and then pour it on in the second and third quarter and then take their foot off the gas pedal. Evan Ormsby has 24 touchdowns in the past 5 games. Casey, that's against Dwanger, Snyder, Carroll's also on there, Northside. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Again, I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago about just the progression of this young man. It's what a wonderful story. I mean, all you can do is just smile and pat the kid on the back and say, great job. I mean, this is a kid that looked like a fish out of water. He looked like a defensive lineman playing quarterback. And, to have the progress he's had, that's usually like at least 2 years worth of work, typically, not 2 weeks. And again, Coach Bill Skelton's done a fantastic job with this offense and with this young man in particular. He's just looked so much more comfortable than he did early on. And they are a bona fide threat now because of it. Because if they were one-dimensional, especially with all those receivers on offense, if they could not find ways to get them the ball, Jared Kistler, Nate Anderson, the Chambers kid, Gage Sparrow, I mean, they're loaded there. If you could not find a way to get those guys the ball in space, it was going to all fall on Braden Hardwick's shoulders. And here we are going into the regular season finale. This offense is clicking on all cylinders. We knew the defense would be good. We knew the special teams would be solid. I like what Coach Zolman's done. He's definitely in the conversation for Coach of the Year.
Oh, absolutely. You can't leave off Luke Palmer. All he does is catch touchdowns like Chris Carter, the receiver. Luke Palmer.
Yeah, I was happy to see him get one here recently. Luke's a great kid. All-state performer last year as a junior, starting to get a little bit more recruiting buzz as well. If he was bigger, again, it's the age-old thing. If he was a couple inches taller, maybe a hair quicker, 15, 20 pounds heavier, he'd be, I think, a legit Division I linebacker because he's got a nose for the ball like no one else.
Yeah, look at Nate Anderson here, number 3 in the area, and he's only a junior. So that's outstanding. Mason Angler, what he did to start the season, he's still at the top of that list. So that'll be another interesting list when you look at the All-SAC wide receivers.
Yeah, there's a couple guys there that can make a late charge. This could be one of those nights that, somebody gets 150 yards, 175 yards, and they give themselves a little bit of a cushion, or they enhance their resume, right, going into all SAC voting. So you'd like to think that a kid like Rocco Sioka, if he had a big night and could eclipse, let's say, 700 yards. Bronte Johnson, I mean, we've talked a lot about the dynamic freshman. He could have a big night against Concordia and maybe vault his numbers up a little bit. So those are the storylines that I'll be keeping an eye on tonight to see if any of these guys can solidify more consideration in terms of all SAC consideration.
Casey, you talked about Quincy English and Roosevelt Norfleet III switching reps there at QB. Obviously, this is a team that needs to get all of their talented players on the field at the same time. Norfleet had one reception last week. Is there another role that Norfleet III can take on this team, or Quincy English for that matter?
Well, I'm sure the Southside coaches are exploring that, and Coach Norfleet hasn't shared that with me, obviously. But by seeing the stats there with Junior there catching a 10-yard pass, they want to have these guys on the field at the same time. English has fared really well these last 2 weeks. Make no mistake, and so I think going forward they'll probably be on the field a lot. But there are some other playmakers. We already talked about Javante Malone. There's Matt Morris. The Hapner kid. I always want to call him Trevor Hapner, who is a fantastic player in all three facets of the game for Southside. So they have other options too. And I don't think you want to just totally revamp your offense entirely just to accommodate, one or two players this late in the season. I think you've got to go with who you feel your best is. If you feel like you want both guys to get reps at quarterback, that's fine. May provide some things for New Haven to think about in terms of preparation, but I don't know if you can get both of them on the field without taking off somebody that's perhaps maybe more talented in space.
Well, as it is, Casey, both Bishop Dwenger and Homestead will finish up with 8-1 records is what it's looking like. Homestead getting the outright championship because they beat the Saints head to head.
Yeah, again, kudos to the Spartans. I'm glad that week one loss didn't hurt them if there was some tiebreaker situations, but since they beat the Saints head to head, they're deservedly champs. There's no guarantee, I suppose, that Dwenger beats Northrop tonight. If Demarius Cowan's able to run the ball, they could pull a surprise. But again, Homestead, they've done the job. So kudos to the Spartans.
And it's like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So for Coach Garrett to sit Devin Tippmann, and if they were to stumble, really no big deal. You still got to get through that 5A sectional where you're going to have Northrop and Northside again.
Yeah, the only thing I think, if from a coaching perspective, that I would worry about is confidence. Do you want to plant any seeds in kids' head? But remember, a year ago, Northrop almost beat Dwenger, right? Late in the season, week 9, and then Dwenger came back a couple weeks later and I think put the wood to him pretty good. So it got their attention. So maybe it works in the other direction. I think they learned from that lesson. I'd like to think a coaching staff out of Dwenger, and I expect them to have a great game plan and try to take care of Northrop and let them know, hey, if we do see you again in a couple weeks, be prepared for us to beat you again. I mean, I think if you have the better personnel with high school kids, you need to go out, show a lot of stuff on film for them to prepare against, and try to go out and win games. I mean, there's a time for moral victories, perhaps. There's times for saving guys. I'm not sure in this matchup for either team it makes a lot of sense, other than if the game gets out of hand either way in the second half, maybe you start resting guys. I understand that, but I think out of the gate, both teams are going to come out saying we're playing our best and we're playing to win.
Yeah, and I don't know if Devin Tippmann being out would be enough for Northrop to pull off that victory. So one last game to look at. Leo, for the first time ever, could win the NEA outright with a win against DeKalb. So it's looking like that's going to happen. And this Leo team, wow, with Landon Livingston heading up that offensive line, it's amazing how it's 5 yards in a cloud of dust, and then boom, they escape from the pile and rattle off 40 yards for a touchdown.
Yeah, this is a team that the defense has gotten so much better. Their ground attack is fantastic. They want to pound you. They want to slow it down. They're not necessarily the flashiest team. Caden Miller's had an all-conference type season. Ethan Crawford, who I found out is not related. He's not the little brother of Rylan Crawford. They're not even related. All this time I thought at least they were cousins. But Rylan Crawford, the playmaker, he's got 5 interceptions. There's a nice picture in GameNight this week of him toe tapping along the sideline. He's had a great season, starting to generate a lot of recruiting buzz as well. You talked about Landon Livingston, also junior, that offensive line that's gotten better and better. And here's the thing. They're healthy, and they're I think pretty much 100%. Mason Sharon is kind of that one outlier, but they've got all their guys. Coach Souter told me yesterday we were 100%. We're excited, and yes, they've got at least a share of the conference title. But my goodness, you're right there. Go get it. Even though you're playing a DeKalb team that's coming off their first win of the year, and a DeKalb team that traditionally has played Leo fairly close through the years. I think Leo goes out and wins this game convincingly and sets themselves up for a potential run in Class 4A.
Yeah, they got Caden Miller back. Remember, he kind of rolled that ankle a little bit in the East Noble game, but it looks like he's starting to hit his stride.
Yeah, he was pretty quiet here recently where his numbers were shut down, and then Ethan Crawford stepped in and had a fantastic game. So they've got, again, they run that kind of that T formation offense where you don't know who's going to be the guy. And last week it was Ethan Crawford. There's a good look at it, 107 yards. And the Columbia City Eagles did a good job taking Caden Miller kind of out of the game. Jackson Barber, 4 for 6. That's opening it up out at Leo High School. And that's all you needed. And all 4 went to Ryland Crawford. He's their playmaker in their passing game. I'd like to see them utilize their backs a little bit more in that offense, whether it be motioning somebody out of the backfield to get them, some space, and then run maybe a wheel route or something. They don't throw a ton to their backs, but they don't throw a ton, period. And you hate to be too one-dimensional. They found out early in the season when they lost to Mooresville 34-17, you've got to be able to throw the ball against the elite teams in Class 4A. And but again, they would not see Mooresville until the state finals if they were fortunate enough to make that kind of run. And they definitely good, because we talk a lot about being built for November. Leo's built for November, outdoor playoff football. So kudos, Jared Souter. He's our coach of the week. He's done a fantastic job out at Leo. He's built a tremendous program. Hats off to the Lions for presumably winning the NE8 championship outright with a win tonight over DeKalb.
Well, I got to tell you, it's not going to be easy for Leo in this sectional. East Noble, and that is not the same team that lost to Leo 24-0. Plus, this game was a lot closer than that 24-0 score. Rowan Zolman is the real deal, and he's 6'5". He's huge out there. He's playing both ways right now for East Noble and looks healthy. And Cole Shupak, with every pass that he throws, seems like he's getting more and more comfortable as QB for the Knights.
He is, and I was mistaken. I thought he replaced Dalton Stinson at quarterback because Stinson wasn't performing in the passing game and wasn't the running threat that Cole Shupak was. But I was mistaken. It was because Dalton Stinson, I believe, has a shoulder injury of some kind that he just wasn't able to rectify. Thus, the switch to Shupak. He's definitely a better running threat, and he's, like you said, becoming more comfortable throwing the ball. The addition of Rowan Zolman in the passing game gives them more of that explosive player that Coach Amstutz was looking for. And again, to your point, there's Northridge. It's really good in this sectional. Angola could be a sleeper team. I mean, this sectional could go a long, long way in having a team make it all the way to the state finals. No doubt about it. But I'm still going with Leo. I think they're the team to beat. Columbia City, Northwood also could provide problems. The East Noble had a win over Northwood earlier in the year. East Noble looks to be the most battle tested with their schedule. Again, they picked up Penn, but we also talked earlier in the year when Leo picked up Mooresville. And I remember making a statement at the time, and you echoed it. These teams will be grateful that they did that. They didn't just take a week off and rest up and prepare for that next opponent. No, they short-term scheduled a big-time opponent. And wouldn't it be ironic to see East Noble or Leo go long in the Class 4A playoffs, and we could point to maybe those early season decisions?
It's a great sectional. Do you give Angola much of a chance? They did lose to Fairfield 29-17.
I think here's the deal, Jeff. I want to see, they've had some issues with quarantine, and so their roster has been hit or miss, I think, all year long. I want to see how they fare tonight at home against Eastside. If Angola can rise up and beat a very good Eastside team, I'll be a believer. So that, to me, that's kind of the litmus test. I want to see how the Hornets play tonight in the Hive. They've looked really good these last couple of weeks, pounding South Bend Clay and Garrett. But to your point, they lost to a Class 2A Fairfield team by 2 scores against another good Class 2A team in Eastside tonight. If Eastside wins that game by 2 or 3 scores or more, then my answer is no. I don't see them competing in this sectional.
Okay, well, I hate to put you on the spot again, Casey. You know that's
Do
something
it.
that just makes me lose sleep. But is Landon Livingston the best offensive lineman in Northeast Indiana?
He's good, but I'd say no. I right now I'm still going with Vinny Feecable. Vinny did not have his best game, admittedly, last week against Snyder. Talking to some of the coaches over there, it sounds like he had a rousing week of practice. He is a very talented football player, as is Landon Livingston, as is DJ Moore at Snyder. And there are a few others, too, that belong in that conversation. But if I had to pick one guy right now, I would take Vinny Feecable. He's a senior. He's headed to IU. He's a legacy guy. His dad played at IU. Now, I have to, full disclosure, I was the best man in his parents' wedding. So I am a bit biased. That being said, I think Vinny Feecable is the best lineman in the area.
I'm sure the Swami's been in your ear, so he would know.
That's fair to say. The Swami has his opinion on that as well.
Okay, well, Casey, what a great regular season. I think we're going to have to do an all SAC episode next week to see if we can pick a nice all SAC team. And then certainly we'll stay with our fans and give them our breakdown of the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Jeff. I'm willing to bet you and I are going to be able to sit and dissect who's on first team, and you and I can probably take the leftovers, right? Second team and honorable mention, and I'll take that team all day long against the quote-unquote starters. It's going to be a tough chore for the coaches, but it's been a great season. Looking forward to week 9 and beyond.
Sweet, I'll take the starters. So well, that'll wrap up the regular season. My name's Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports. That's Casey O'Boyle with Northeast Indiana Game Night. So, folks, thanks so much for joining us all regular season long. We have had a blast, and we hope you have enjoyed as well.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Casey.